Wake the up, samurai. We have a city to...
Bleed. This samurai build for Elden Ring is all about bleeding and blood and all that good hygienic stuff. Let's go. This video was brought to you by our latest members, The Other Side and Duck of the Wonder. Thank you for joining the membership program, and if you're interested in joining the program, click that little join button down below. The starting class for this build is the Samurai, but you could also go Bandit or Warrior. If you're looking for some of that basic initial setup and for that early stages of how to play this build, then check out my class guide that will be linked here. Also, as a minor spoiler warning, I'll be showing areas past Stormvale Castle, but I'll be avoiding any of the major bosses as to not spoil anything for you. How to play this build. Now, for this build, I tinkered with the Bloodhound Fang as well as dual wielding the Uchi Katanas, but instead I've landed with the Naga Kiba, which is a variation of the katana, and I feel that the Bloodhound's Fang is a really solid weapon. The Ash of War on it is brilliant. It changes the way this build plays to be too slower paced, kind of like a colossal weapon user, like a strength build or something. And dual wielding Uchi Katanas is fun, but I wanted to make this build more about bloody slash and following up with that. And I found that this katana that we have landed on is just so perfect for this build, and having a shield now offhand just to give us some defensive capabilities that really make this build have a really good synergy. So essentially what we do here is we're using the Naga Kiba, which is a longer Uchi Katana that you get from a particular NPC, which I'll talk about in the gear section, but this weapon is basically has the exact same move sets and everything like that as the Uchi Katana. It's just much longer, so you have such a long extended range, and we're putting the Bloody Slash Ash of War on it, which when you use this Ash of War, it does take a little bit of your health, but it does a massive slash with heaps of damage that you can one-shot a lot of the trash enemies and deal heaps of damage to bosses. You can also stagger bosses and enemies with this very regularly, so you can follow up with critical hits. Now, because this does take some of our health, when we do stagger enemies and you're following up with critical attacks, we're also using the Assassin Crimson Dagger, so we restore that health back that we're losing from using Bloody Slash. So when you do stagger enemies, even if you move behind them, critical hit, backstab, all that good stuff, you'll get some of that health back, so you're not wasting a flask just to get that health back from using the Bloody Slash ability. Now, I'm not using an Ash of War on my shield so that I can have the shield in my offhand and then still use Bloody Slash. If you put an Ash of War onto your shield, it will overwrite what Ash of War is active, so you can't have the shield out and the Bloody Slash, so you just be mindful of that. And we're still actually using the longbow for the samurai here, and if you didn't start out as the samurai, you can go buy a longbow, but we're using the longbow for some range damage, which I think is always important, and Mighty Shot is still just as good as you get into that mid stage of the game for pulling enemies, dealing some damage from range, as well as picking off some enemies before you actually go into the fight in melee. And a lot of cases with melee, you don't want to just rush straight in because you can get killed very easily, so it's just something to be mindful of. And that's kind of how this build plays together. We're just dealing damage, dealing Bloody Slash, and just having a grand old time. Now, you might be thinking, why not use the Moonveil Katana? And the reason that we're not using that katana, while it is brilliant, I love the Moonveil Katana, it costs so much intelligence to invest in that at that point, you're not really playing a samurai or a dex build, you're just playing like a mage that's using a katana. And that's exactly how I built my mage, and you can go check out that class guide as well, and I'm using the Moonveil Katana in that build. But if you're going that route, you're really just playing as a mage because it costs so much to invest in. But we're really focusing on the bleed damage here from Bloody Slash and just from using our Naga Kiba Katana as well. For your Ashes of War, as mentioned, we're using the Bloody Slash Ash of War. You could also use Unsheath if you don't feel comfortable trading your health, especially in boss fights. That's up to you. Unsheath is still fantastic. You can get Bloody Slash at Fort Hate in like West Limgrave. There's a knight up here that will use the attack on you. You just need to kill him and you'll get the Ash of War. If you want to focus more on the blood loss bleed up and putting that effect on enemies, you can change the Ash of War to be specifically the blood type, which will increase its blood loss buildup. So you will perform that blood loss buildup on enemies much more regularly. However, I've chosen to go keen because we're stacking this with dexterity, and that increases our dexterity scaling. And I believe there is an issue with blood scaling or arcane scaling. It doesn't seem to scale properly. It doesn't increase the amount of damage you do. I'm not sure there. And I've seen some people talking about it on the forums that it's currently bugged. So at the moment, I'm sticking with keen, but we may, as we develop this build, go into the arcane and into the bloodline a little bit more. For your flasks, we're focusing entirely on health with 1 or 2 FP because we are using Ashes of War very regularly. So you do want to have at least 1 or 2 FP flasks just to restore FP used from your Ashes of War. For your attributes, we're focusing almost entirely on dexterity. You will need some strength to wield the Naga Kiba, but I think it's 18 that you need, and you start out with a little bit anyway, so it's not too much of an investment, but we're focusing almost entirely on dexterity and then a little bit into vigor because we are going to be chunking our own health as well as the damage we do take, so you want to make sure you've got some vigor to back you up there, and endurance as a backup because this build is very stamina hungry. You're just going to be slashing away with the katana, so any extra points do do want to go into endurance. And I've been tinkering with arcane as the scaling. That's why my arcane is a little bit high, but you don't have to do that. You can just put those extra points into dex, vigor, or endurance, whatever you feel is more necessary. Now, where you can get all the gear that we're using here for the Nagakiba katana, you get this from the hunter Ura. Now, he is either at his camp near the seaside ruins, or he is north of Murkwater Cave, depending if you've taken out the bloody finger that is there. You unfortunately will have to kill him. Now, the downside of that is that you can't progress his story. You can, however, just progress his story, and eventually at the end of his storyline, he will give you the katana. But if you just want the katana, just kill him and you get it, and it's much easier. But that's up to you. If you want to use the Uchi katana first and then maybe switch later. We're also using the green turtle talisman, which you can get in summon water. This just helps with our stamina recovery because we are using a lot of endurance, and we're using the assassin crimson dagger for our HP returns on critical hits. And this is found in the Death Touch catacombs, which is also the same place that you get a second Uchi katana if you're going that route. For your armor, I think it's really up to you. I am a firm believer that you should change the armor depending on your scenario. I've been using the knight set that you can buy at the Round Table Hold for the most part because it has decent resistances and it's not too heavy. And because we've got a lot of endurance, we can wear some of that heavier armor. And the initial samurai armor, though it looks cool, it doesn't have the best physical resistances. But I've been just chopping and changing pieces as I see fit. But that's kind of the route that I've gone with armor. Some general tips for this build is to upgrade your Nagakiba and your longbow as quickly as possible, especially your longbow. The longbows don't do heaps of damage. Once you start getting past those initial stages, you're going to have to upgrade it to keep its damage pace up. And if you're missing a bit of health, don't waste a flask. You can backtrack and backstab enemies, or just use those staggers to build that little bit extra back up. Just avoid using bloody slash in those scenarios. And you should be crafting the additional arrow types like fire and poison and sleep and blood and whatever they may be. You want to craft them and use them much more commonly than the standard like bloodbone arrows. You can obviously buy arrows from vendors and the fire arrows. Using the fire arrows mostly for bosses and the tougher encounters is very important because you get the extra 95 fire damage on the fire arrows. It just does more damage, especially as you get past that initial stage and the arrows don't scale as well. You do want to get some of those better elemental arrows as soon as possible. The blood loss build up effect on enemies, you probably won't see it trigger on trash enemies, really only on bosses, but essentially it's the same as like the blood loss that builds up on you, how you'll get that little bar. And once that fills up, it will deal a decent amount of damage to the enemy. If you are focusing on that, it's worth just being mindful not to be too overly aggressive to try and trigger that status, because the bar will decrease as you aren't hitting them, but just be careful not to be overly aggressive trying to get that effect to trigger. You're better off winning the fight overall and being patient than trying to be overly aggressive just to get that effect to occur on the enemy. But it will happen if you are going that route. So just be mindful and then focus on using the bloody slash and just slashing away at the enemy to increase that bar and just keeping the pressure on, but don't overexert yourself trying to make that happen because you can die very easily if you are trying to focus on just using the blood loss build up on enemies. And lastly, make sure you check out my other builds. I'm working on some faith builds at the moment, so do let me know if there's anything specific you'd like to see in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.